Okay, you can hear me? Okay. I have Pastor Joe's device on. I'm pretty sure that it's blessed and probably disinfected. but I'm happy to be here. Thank you, Faye. We'll get you a little bit of refund on the fee later on, you know. Oh, well, that's what I don't like to let out. I like to let people know I'm very expensive, and just open your wallets when you come. That's just how we. It's kind of like giving to the church. I don't think 10% is too much, or not enough. One of the two. Okay. So, anyway, my name is Jared Childers. I am an attorney here in Chambersburg. Have an office also in Waynesboro. Another office in McConnellsburg, but don't really talk about that very often. What I am is an elder law attorney, and a lot of what I deal with is the death and dying process. And so with some situations, when someone passes away, I'll help a family through that process. Now, if someone comes to me before they've passed away, then it's a little easier for us to get organized, and we might do some estate planning documents. We might plan for the potential, or I shouldn't say potential, the inevitable passing of our lives. And then also what we deal with is what happens if we don't die? What happens if we get sick? Because unfortunately here in Pennsylvania, death is pretty simple. You know, you pass away, you pass on to the great beyond, you're singing with the choirs, everything's good. For you, everything's wonderful. The family has to deal with it. For a lot of folks, though, maybe people don't think of it that way, but for us, we have faith that we're going somewhere better, and everybody else has to deal with what's left. The problem a lot of times is what happens if we get sick and we don't pass away and we end up in a long-term care setting, into a nursing home. And so what we'll talk about tonight, and we'll kind of go with wherever direction you want, is we'll talk a little bit about how do we prepare, the estate planning world. I understand you had another individual came last week. Was it a funeral director? Okay, you might have talked about the services and what does that involve. Maybe they talked about cost. Maybe they talked about the process of that. So we can talk about also the estate planning documents, the paperwork that you do prior to death. We can talk about what happens after death, and if you would like, we can talk about, well, what happens if there's a stop at a nursing home from now to death. And so those are the kind of the three big areas that I work in. I don't do anything else. If you want to divorce each other or sue somebody or anything else, I send all that stuff out. I don't really know very much. I know a lot about a very small amount of things, okay? And so we're going to talk about that. So what I thought we'd do first, we talk just kind of a general conversation about estate planning. What does that mean? What does that look like? What do you do? What pieces do you need? What do you not need? Everybody can hear me okay? And just so you know, I'm very open to questions. We can talk about things, and if I don't know, I'll just lie to you. I mean, oh shoot, I'm on tape. I will just make something up, which may or may not be true. Okay, but I'll let you know when I'm making it up. And so here in Pennsylvania, we have 4 documents I think are very important. We have a last will and testament. We have what's known as a power of attorney, a mental health care power of attorney, and finally a living will. And this is not in your material. The material is just for things if you're really bored one night and you want to read about a nursing home. These are things we may not get to. So this is additional information. So this way you can just pay attention to me, because that's really what I like, is people to pay attention to me. And I didn't get enough of that as a child. And so here I am. Okay? So here in Pennsylvania we have these 4 documents. We'll take each one in turn, and we'll look at what does it do, what's it for, what are its limitations, and then we'll kind of move on from there. But let's first talk about the last will and testament. I think most people have gone to enough TV, you've seen enough shows that you understand what happens when you have a will. You write a piece of paper that says, at my death, I want this to take place. I want my candy dish to go to Sally, I want my stool to go to Johnny, and my $100, I want to get it divided up between whoever it might be. And really, a will can be as simple as you picking up a napkin, writing on the back of the napkin, hey, give everything to Johnny. This is my will. Sign and date it. Bam, that's a will. You don't need, oh man, this is on tape, so I don't really know if I should say it, but you don't need an attorney to do a will. Okay, now that doesn't mean we don't have a place in the process, but a will in and of itself is a fairly simple document. Now, there's bells and whistles in it. There's things that might be helpful to talk about with someone, but a will can be as simple as that napkin, that pad of paper, this is my will, give it to Johnny. Johnny's in charge. The pieces of the will I like to see is who's getting it, the stuff, the money, the whatever. But if you just say everything, well, that's everything. Give all, well, that's all. Who's getting it? Who's in charge? Okay, that's known as the executor. That's the person that has to step up and actually do the work. But you know what? If you don't have a will, guess what happens? Pennsylvania writes a will for you, which may or may not be what you want, but Pennsylvania does not want someone to pass away without a plan in place about what's supposed to happen. So while I think a will is important, I'm not saying don't do a will, and I'm not saying don't go to attorneys, heavens no. But what I'm saying is that we need to be thinking about, well, why are we doing it? What's the purpose? And so the counseling part of the process, I think, becomes more important than the product itself. Because the product itself anymore is becoming a commodity. You can go to LegalZoom.com, you can go to Costco and get a will. You type in, the fill in the blanks, it prints off a document, it's 28 pages long, and it says, this will cover everything you need to have. And you know what? Yeah, I see those all the time, and if it works, it works. Where I think the conversation happens and why some people come to attorneys is they want to talk about, well, what about my daughter Susie? Susie has a child who has a disability. Susie's not very good with money. I don't know if I want Susie to get this money. Ooh, Johnny and Susie, they don't get along. We don't want Johnny and Susie to have to work together because they just can't play nice. They threw sand in the sandbox when they were 2, and they haven't stopped. And those are things that with the attorney and your counselor, that's the conversation about, well, what and who and why are we doing certain things? For example, I'm dealing with a situation where we look at this and say, we have 2 kids that just don't quite get along. Well, they're not the executors. They're the beneficiaries. Mom loves them, but mom didn't want them to have to play together because they just can't play together. Okay, so we name someone else to be the executor. Now, the situation might be, we have 2 children, they're 18 and 20, great kids, but we're not quite ready for them to get $500,000. Or $20 even. We're not quite ready for them. And so we talk about, well, how do we get the money to them without harming our children or our loved one by getting it to them too quickly? And so with the will, while I think it's a pretty straightforward document that it says, okay, it can have lots of bells and whistles, but it also can be pretty plain vanilla. Everything goes to my husband and wife, and at my death it divides equally between the 3 children. If one of them passes away, it goes to their issue per stirpes, which means to their children. So it goes in the bloodline, and that's pretty plain vanilla. But we want Uncle John to be the executor because the 3 kids are out of town, or the 3 kids, whatever it might be. So while a will, I think, is important, it isn't necessarily, let's just say it's important. But a lot of things go, and a lot of things work, and they work just as well as something fancy you draw up. And so we just have to be thinking about, well, what are we trying to accomplish? More important than the will is a power of attorney. Because a will is a document that comes into play after your death, where a power of attorney comes into play while you're alive. And so the power of attorney is a document that says, while I'm alive, I trust this person here to act on my behalf. So everybody's heard of powers of attorney before, and you might hear horror stories. I heard about my uncle who named his son, my cousin, to be his agent, and he kicked my uncle out of his house. Or he sold my uncle's house. Or he put my uncle into a nursing home. or he did something not appropriate. And so with the power of attorney, this is the document that says, yes, I trust this person to act on my behalf, but with the power of attorney, you're not giving up any of your rights. You still have the right to make your own decisions. So let's say I name my wife to be my agent under a power of attorney. Okay, I named my wife to be my agent. Well, that makes sense because she bosses me around and I take it, But I've named her, and if she really gets out of line, which she probably will never watch this, so this is okay, all right? So if she really gets out of line and really starts bossing me around, I can always fire her. Now that's very awkward for like the Thanksgiving meals and, dinner time and that sort of thing. But an agent cannot override my decisions using a power of attorney in and of itself. Okay? So if let's say I name my 3 children. I say my 3 kids can act as my agents. Even if all 3 kids gang up on me, I still retain my legal rights. Because I can fire them. Even if my wife and the 3 kids and my brother, I've all named all 5 of them, I can fire all of them. And so this idea of the power of attorney, sometimes people are scared of this document. They say, I don't want to let this person boss me around. Well, hold on. You're not letting them tell you what to do. You're delegating authority to someone to act on your behalf. But because you gave that authority, you can take away that authority. So far, so good? All right. So what happens when you name someone that's a bad actor? What if they're a bad egg? What do you do? So that's where, with the power of attorney, in my opinion, this is the most important document you could have because it's there to protect you while you are alive. Because we've already established that if you die, it's not your problem. Right? I mean, it's everybody else's problem. Okay? But the power of attorney is something that can really harm you. You are going to feel the effects of this document. And so with the power of attorney, it is vital. I can't stress it enough. It is vital that you name the right person. It doesn't matter how fancy the paperwork is, how limiting it is, or how broad it is, the language in the document itself. If you name the wrong person, you're just going to have problems. Because the document may say, no, you can't steal my money. Well, I mean, that kind of makes sense, right? We don't want people stealing each other's money. You can't take my money, but if they go to the bank with a power of attorney and start writing checks to pay their bills, that's the wrong person to name. And so when we're talking about powers of attorney, this is a big, big deal because this is a document that says, I allow this person, I give them permission to sell my house. I give them permission to take my name off the deed. I give them permission to cash in my retirement account. Wow, that's a big deal. Scary? And so when you think about attorney, then the wrong agent, you all, and that's odd. But with the power of attorney, this is something that you look at, and for my world, now I'm putting on my nursing home hat here. Powers of attorney documents are, like I said, very powerful, but it has its limitations. And the limitations are based on the language in the document. So if the power of attorney itself says, hey, look, I'm allowing this person to do everything, but it doesn't give them permission to try to protect your assets, then should you go to a nursing home, you have to pay the bill. The agent, all they can do, their hands are tied. They can pay the bill, but they can't try to protect assets. And so the power of attorney, and this is where I'm a little bit persnickety about paperwork, because I need something that will allow my agents the ability to move assets. Okay, so I said I wouldn't pick on you, but I was lying. See, I tell people when I'm lying, okay? All right, so I'm guessing, husband and wife? Okay, you're just sitting next to each other. I just was guessing. Okay, so we're going to pick on you, okay? There's not a quiz in this, okay? But let's say we have a husband and wife situation, and let's say you get sick and need to go to a nursing home. Now, we don't want you to go to a nursing home. I'm not trying to say sign up, it's great. But if you end up in a nursing home, let's say you have a massive stroke, fall, break a hip, something bad happens, and you end up in a nursing home, well, we look at these assets, and nursing homes are running between $10,000 and $14,000 a month, depending on where you're at. So let's just say 12,000, just because that's a nice round number. It's like in the middle. So you're looking at a $12,000 a month bill at a nursing home. Well, you own a home? Do you like it? Yeah, okay, this is where you say yes. That was the quiz part. But if you're in the nursing home, I don't want the state to force the sale. I don't want the nursing home to have access to the property. Well, that property is exempt and can be exempt, but what I might need to do is take your name off of the deed to the house if you're in the nursing home. Now, don't take his name off the deed just yet, okay? But if you're in the nursing home, if the choice is the nursing home having access to the property or my spouse having access to the property, would you rather she gets it versus the nursing home? Well, if you can't sign the deed, so we're trying to understand why do we need powers of attorney. If you can't sign the deed because you are so incapacitated, you're in a nursing home, who's going to sign the deed? I need you to sign it. So you need to do a paperwork, and I'm not saying you have to do it, you can do whatever you want, but you would do a paperwork to say, I trust this person here, my agent, it might be my spouse, it might be my child, it might be someone else that I trust. I trust that person there to sign things on my behalf. It might be taking my name off of the deed to the house. So a lot of times we think, there's no way in the world would I ever want someone to be able to take my name off of my house. Except, well, maybe that situation. I can think of a couple others, but you can try to stump me in a minute if you want. But so that might be a really good reason to take a spouse's name off the deed. But then wait a second, we go back to the will. My guess is that if you have a will, it says, at my death, everything goes to my husband or to my wife. Right? That's pretty normal. I see a lot of head shakes here. Okay, so if everything goes to my husband or my wife, if I just put the house into your name because he's in the home, what happens if you die before he does? Guess what? Everything goes to him. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
My mom died of a heart attack almost 3 years before my dad did. And kids got everything. Which everybody got a portion. In other words, my dad got
some.
His sixth.
Okay, so there was a different will.
His 3 daughters, or his 4 daughters, got his portion.
Sure. So the question is what did the will say? Did the will say everything goes to my husband? Or did the will say 1/6 of this goes to my husband?
I think that's the way it was. I'm not sure.
So this is where we then, like if something happens in a nursing home setting, I'm going to go look back at this will. Normally it's like an I love you will. I love you, you get it, But in a nursing home, yeah, we still love each other. And so I say it like this. Although I love you very much, I'm giving you nothing. It's not that I don't love you, but I don't want to expose these assets to the nursing home because I like the kids better than fill in the blank of nursing home. Or fill in the blank to the state of Pennsylvania. Okay, so the idea here is that, yeah, we just want to make sure we got our pieces lined up. Yeah, that's the ticket. So the problem is that if we go, and this, you're like 4 steps ahead of me, but the idea is, if you go on to benefits from the state of Pennsylvania because you've run out of money, Pennsylvania at your death will come after whatever's left in the bucket, and they want to get paid back. And so we avoid that by avoiding having money or assets in the bucket when you pass away. Because if you gave the house back to your husband, he can have the house, he can be in the nursing home can't force him to sell the house. The problem is if Pennsylvania helps pay the bill at the nursing home, Then Pennsylvania comes in and says, hey, we paid out $100,000 for you. We want to get paid back. And then they come after the house. So those, and I'm not saying don't do that right now. I mean, don't swap your houses, don't change your wills. But those are things that we think about, well, maybe we should be thinking about if events are happening in our lives. And so like a will, you might have written a will back in I just saw one today. It was I think it was like 86 or 87. And I looked at it, I'm like, yeah, this is fine. You don't need to change this. We got the right players. I mean, you want the kids to be the executors. There's two kids. They're both executors. They play nice together. They're the ones that get the money. 86, great, no problem. Let's let it be. And we may change it someday, but right now, we don't need to. So a will may be you write it one time, you never have to change it. Powers of attorney, my guess is if you haven't updated it or had someone look at it in the last 10 years, you might want to just dust it off. May not need to redo it, but dust it off, take a look at it. Is this still the right person? Because we're thinking about time, we're thinking, okay, well, at 65, I'm just retiring. My life will be very different at 75. I'm farther into retirement. I understand what retirement's going to look like. I understand what I'm spending, what I'm doing. 85 is a lot different than 75. 95, maybe a little bit different than 85. So every 10 years or so, we're dusting things off. Just take a look at it and say, where am I at now? Does this still the right people? Is this the right people to act on my behalf? Is the document up to date? And that's just times that we dust it off. Now, I said before, like wills, everything goes, well, not everything, but just about anything goes, and if you don't write a will, Pennsylvania will write a will for you, and it just basically says go to the spouse or the kids, and with some variations there. But with a power of attorney, this is one that it has to be done properly or it just doesn't work. And so this is one I would not get off of LegalZoom. This is not the Costco, value pack of, documents that you want to get. You need to have something that's going to work for you, but also be thinking about, am I trying to preserve or protect assets or not? 9 times out of 10, if you get it from a box, it won't have the right language in there to protect funds or monies from long-term care or nursing home expenses. And I know we have some younger folks here, so we're not only going to be talking about nursing homes, sorry. I know you guys are all excited. But that is something, a big part of my life is what happens as we age. So that's a power of attorney. Any questions so far?
So that's a legal document? Does it have to be notarized or anything like that? And is it only something that an attorney can do?
So the question is the power of attorney a legal document? Does it have to be notarized and whatnot? Can only an attorney take care of it? So it is a legal document. I think it would be very, 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 very good to have an attorney involved. Do you have to have an attorney involved? Well, technically probably not, but you get what you pay for. I guess that's me being protectionist of my craft. But the document itself has to be signed with 2 witnesses plus the notary. That can't be anybody that's interested in the estate. So there's some very strict requirements to allow that document to be valid. And so anymore, the power of attorney, you kind of need to maybe talk to someone. Not to say you can't get it out of a box, but sometimes they're accurate. It's just, that's a moving target right now. So, any other questions? Yeah. Okay, so you're asking, is there a time limit to remove someone's name from a deed if someone goes into a nursing home? The answer is, between spouses, I can do it after the nursing home admission, but you might be referring to or thinking about there's this 5-year look-back rule, and we're going to talk about that. That's why you're going to know because I'm going to start drawing pictures, because that gets a little complicated. Between spouses, generally speaking, we can move assets between spouses with no penalizing transactions, as long as it stays within the spouses.
As far as the power of attorney, is it better to just have one person, or if you have like 3 kids, can they all be executors?
So the question is it better to have one person as an executor or an agent under a power of attorney, or do you name all 3 kids? It depends on the kids. Then I'm good. I mean, I like backups, and this is more of a personal opinion versus right or wrong. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I know there's attorneys that absolutely disagree with me. They just want one person. If that person can't do it, then that person. Then you have this like chain of command. But I think our lives are more fluid than that. And so what I look at it is I say, look, if I have 3 kids, I trust them all, they all play nice together. Now, you got to take off your tinted glasses when you're looking at your kids. You know, you got to really look at them and say, yeah, they play nice, but they've always fought about that. I was like, okay, well, you know, that's where I try to pull things out. I'm like, okay, but how nice do they play? And so if you name all 3 of them, I like that. Because if one's down in the Bahamas, the other one's here in town, well, that works. You know, so we don't have to prove, you know, Jimmy's not here for Johnny to step in. And so I like having multiple backups as long as the right people. Okay? You can make it restrictive in the sense that 2 of the 3 have to act. And there's pros and cons there. It's nice because you're forcing the family to work together. So the question is, you know, do they have to work together or can they work independently? The answer is you can do either one. I think of it as, and this is just me, is I'm thinking of it as, what is practical? Is it practical to force all 3 of my kids to be in the same room at the same time to make a decision? Well, if one's in California, one's in Arkansas, and one's here, maybe not. But, you know, anymore with phones, and, I mean, people can be in Saudi Arabia, and they're just as accessible as next door, maybe even more so. You know, but I don't know what else there is to do. I don't know what there is to do in Saudi Arabia. I just made that one up. But the idea is that, you know, the distance isn't necessarily a problem. A lot of times we have it in our minds, we can only name the kid that's here in town because they're the ones who are going to drive me to the doctor. So, they can be the driver. They may not be the right agent. They may not be the right person to deal with the finances. So the question is if I know I'm going to a nursing home, and I'm thinking I want to protect this property for my family. If it's a husband and wife situation, you can do this anytime, before you go, after you go, it doesn't matter. But if it's trying to get it to the kids, I'm just pretending there's kids involved. If you want to get it to the kids and you don't want to take a penalty for it, you have to do it 5 years before you go to a nursing home. So there's a lot of planning we can do if you can tell me when you're going to have that massive stroke. As soon as you can tell me that, oh man, I'm going to make lots of money. Okay, and if you can tell me when you're going to die, I got some ideas there too. Okay, yes sir.
You're talking about protecting your assets.
Mm-hmm. So can I just take a pause from the nursing home stuff because I'll talk about all those things, and I promise, and I'll stay as long as you want or until the tape runs out, okay? And so, because hold that, and let's come back to it. And if I don't answer it, then I've not done my job for you tonight, right here, okay? Because I've only got to document number 2. I'm like 5% through my presentation. I'm very wordy. I'm sorry. But so, yes, sir. So the question is if I make her my power of attorney, she makes me my power of attorney, we're going down 81, going about 103 miles per hour, and I get slaughtered by a Mack truck. That's the question? It doesn't matter because you're dead. You're singing with the choirs. What do you care? But there we deal with the will. Because the power of attorney only is valid while you're alive. So now if you go down 182 miles per hour, don't go that fast. Okay, the Chevy won't go that fast. Okay, all right, well, let's say you have some foreign make or model, I don't know, but you're cruising along, you have that accident, and you're both in the nursing home. That's the problem. So if you've named each other on your documents and you're both incapacitated, who are our backups? And that's why I want to see backups. You know, because if you're a daredevil and you like living on the edge, then we need to build in some backups in case you're not available, or your spouse is not available, or your child's not available. I mean, who is it that you might need to step in? Does that answer your question? Okay. Any other questions so far? Okay, so we're going to keep going. Oh, yes, sir, in the back.
So my question is, can you have multiple agents for different areas of the power of attorney? Have one for your financial assets, you have one for your online accounts, should we break it up like that?
Oh, yeah. The question is can you break up the power of attorney for specific assets or for specific areas of your life? The simple answer is if you have a general power of attorney for financial, we are trying to put the kitchens, we're trying to capture everything. If you want one individual to be able to have access to one account, then deal directly with that institution about having them on as an agent. Not necessarily as an owner of the account, because I don't want them to have ownership rights of my account generally, but as an agent. Because I don't want them to die or get divorced or get disabled and then my money gets sucked into their problems. If they're on as an agent, they can act on the account, but they can't have ownership rights of the account. So that's the difference with the power of attorney versus ownership rights or making joint accounts, is that the agent under a power of attorney is acting on your behalf, but it's still your money. For medical, that's not exactly common. A lot of times it's the same people are doing everything, but a lot of times what we'll do is say, all right, my daughter's a nurse, she's my medical person, but she's really not great with money. So I'm going to have, my other daughter as my money person. Daughter number 1 is the medical person. Daughter number 2 is the financial person. Daughter number 2, yeah, she's a little squeamish. She's not the right person for the medical, and so we can separate it out that way. Is that kind of responsive? Okay. All right. Any other questions so far? Yes, ma'am. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. This is me talking like a lawyer. I apologize. I try to get into English right now for you. Okay. A power of attorney is the document itself. The piece of paper itself is called a power of attorney. The agent is the person that was actually named. So if I name Pastor Joe as my agent, because he seems trustworthy, an upstanding citizen. Well, hold on a second. Let me rephrase that. I want to name this young lady here because she looks a little bit more trustworthy. But if I name Pastor Joe as my agent, then he can act on my behalf, but I name him in the document called a power of attorney. 10 times out of 10, people just say power of attorney thinking of the person. Technically, that's not accurate, but it's okay. We know what you're talking about. Like the 4 of us in the world that know the difference, we just kind of roll with it. So, okay. Any other questions so far? These are great, great questions. Okay, so let's move on. Let's talk about the power of attorney. I generally like to have a really robust document, all financial, all medical. This is my person. But you can carve out the medical part. But there's something here in Pennsylvania called a mental health care power of attorney. So we have the will, the last will and testament. We have the power of attorney, generally financial, medical. The third document that we deal with here in Pennsylvania is called a mental health power of attorney. This is we're one of, I think, 16 or 17 states in the country that have this law in place. And what it is it basically says this: if I develop an organic brain syndrome, which I don't really know what that is, but they tell me it's like dementia, like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Lewy body's disease, these types of forms of dementia that I'm not thinking straight. Here in Pennsylvania, we have to specifically identify and name a mental health care agent. We have to give that person permission to seek treatment for us if I'm suffering from dementia. Now, my guess, are we pointing at people? Me? Oh, I thought you were pointing at that lady over there. I'm like, I don't know. She looks okay to me.
Wouldn't your medical power of attorney take care of that?
Sort of, but not exactly. And this is why. Because if you're in a lockdown situation, like you're at the behavioral health unit up at the hospital, there, you might be there against your wishes. Because I'm sure everybody in the room has dealt with at least somebody that you've suspected wasn't thinking all that great. A couple candles short, you know what I mean? Okay? And so that person, a lot of times in their mind, they are you pointing at, okay, well, let's just pretend that this gentleman here, no, somebody's just not firing on all cylinders, okay? So, that person sometimes feels like they're the only smart one in the room, and everybody else has lost their minds. What do you mean you don't remember we talked about this? What do you mean? It's just this idea. There's sometimes a breakdown in our thought process. It's not right or wrong. It just happens, and it's sad. It's horrible. But so let's say we have someone suffering from Alzheimer's. In their mind, they're fine. You say, Mom, we need to go to the hospital. We need to go to the doctor. I'm fine. Let me be. But Mom goes out in the middle of winter without her coat on, middle of the night, doesn't know how to get back home. That's a real concern, and that happens. You see the silver alerts? Those are our senior citizens, not to pick on the senior citizens. Thank you. But let's just say some people with certain maturity level, okay, that starts to break down a little bit, and they forget or they lose their way. In their mind, they're fine. They're going to school. They're going to the store. They're doing whatever it is. In their mind, they're fine. Under the law, we respect that person's right to do whatever they want. Because if I have a power of attorney and I've named Pastor Joe can't boss me around because I can fire him. But if I'm out of my mind, no, that's not the legal term. That was just my term. But if I'm not thinking clearly and he tries to step in, guess who I'm going to fight? I'm going to fight him. You don't tell me what to do. You punk kid. Yeah. But
And you have a medical power of attorney, not a plain power of attorney,
mhm.
medical power of attorney, then doesn't that medical power of attorney with that physician able to take?
So the question is, but what the doctor says that Mom can't make good decisions, it doesn't matter. Because until a judge says, this is where doctors and lawyers disagree a little bit, because where the judge says goes. And if a judge hasn't said that you cannot make your decisions, it is presumed you're making the decision. Now, let's be realistic. If you're up at the hospital, the doctors aren't going to let you do something if they don't want you to because they're bossy. Okay? But when they call me in, I have to say, I don't care if she doesn't know what she's doing, that's what we do. That's the lawyer part of it. And so the mental health power of attorney is designed specifically for this situation because it says if there are two doctors that agree, one being a psychiatrist, that you are not thinking clearly, this allows your agent to actually override your decisions. So that's why Pennsylvania has exactly what she's suggesting is the reason we have the paperwork. Because we don't want to have to run into a judge and say, Mom's going crazy. It's actually going to be my dad. I already know that. But
So can you have the same agent for the medical and the mental health?
the question is, can you have the same agent for all of it? The answer is yes. And a lot of times it is. A lot of times it is. And so in that mental health component, it has kind of two parts to it. The first part is I trust this person, but I'm giving them permission to override my decisions, provided they have two doctors, one being a psychiatrist, that agrees that I'm not thinking clearly. So this is the answer that you are looking for. This is how you get around this concern of us we're trying to protect ourselves from ourselves.
If somebody has been at behavioral health, would you encourage that family member to draw up for?
I encourage everybody to do it.
Okay.
So the question is, if there's a family history of behavioral health issues, which is mental health issues, Alzheimer's, dementia, schizophrenia, just kind of fill in the blank, would we recommend getting this in place? A lot of times for my younger clients, when I consider younger is like 60 and below, that's young in my office. My sweet spot's right about 75. You start getting old about 95. That's kind of where we're at in my world. But for my younger clients, I say, do it, don't do it. I'm not as concerned unless there is family history, or actually, I don't really give people options. I just do it. Sure. And so a lot of times parents, let's just say parents, are resistive to, we don't, like if I came in and I started talking to you, hey, here's a mental health power of attorney. I think you might need this. A lot of times that doesn't go over very well. I mean, except for this guy, he doesn't know what's going on. He's like, whatever, he just sign it. But a lot of times people resist that. And so when we approach this, I want to meet someone where they're at. And if there is some diminishing capacity, if there's some breakdown, we don't focus on the breakdown, we focus on what's good. And we start focusing a lot of times, especially people who've worked for a living, they're not independently wealthy, they like to save what they earned. And so we start talking about the finances, we talk about money, and then we also kind of slip in a little bit the mental health, because if I do a power of attorney, I do the mental health. That's just my office, that's my position. If I do one, I do it all because I don't know what's going to happen in your life. I'm just covering everything. And so we maybe need to spruce up the power of attorney so we can not exactly slip in. I don't want to suggest that we're not explaining everything to the client, but sometimes we don't need to put a bright light on, Dad, you're not doing well. We want to meet them where they're at and help them be the best they can be where they are. So, yes, ma'am.
We have a living will and a will made up.
Mm-hmm.
How often should you find out?
So the question is I have some legal paperwork. I'm just going to make it generic. How often do I need to look at? I think every 10 years you ought to dust it off. You may not change it, but just look at it and say, does this still look right? So the question is, should you go to an attorney or not? Of course you should come to me. I mean, some random attorney somewhere. That's a loaded question. But really, if you look at the will and it makes sense to you, fine. I don't think, if you can read it and you understand it, then I don't think you need to go to an attorney. So I guess my answer is I don't think you have to go to an attorney for except for a power of attorney. I'm going to say you really need to go to an attorney for a power of attorney. And my bias is elder law, so I deal a lot with long-term care, nursing homes, that sort of thing. And so my strong recommendation is you go to someone who specializes in that field, because all powers of attorney are not created equal. Okay? Man may be, but not powers of attorney. Okay? So living will is the fourth document in the mix. This, a lot of times, is combined with a medical or healthcare power of attorney. So the living will, generally, how I write it, I kind of write it in two phases. Phase one, it basically says, this is the person I trust. I give them permission to make medical decisions on my behalf, to give me treatment or to withhold treatment. Okay? And then it shifts. Then it goes into the directive part and says, but if I'm at an end stage of life, if I am permanently unconscious, if there's no realistic hope of significant recovery, then I'm giving direction to my family or to my agent, that person we've named, to withdraw treatment. That's generally what it says. And it talks about who's in charge. And a lot of times from a lawyer's perspective, I can't talk about all lawyers. Let's just say from my perspective, it's a very gray, touchy-feely document. I hate this document from a precision point of view because it uses terms like hope. Well, what does hope mean to you may be different than what hope means to me versus him or her. So hope is a very subjective standard. But what you're doing is you're naming someone and you're asking that person to make a decision. Do you think I'm going to pull through or not? If you don't think it's realistic, I'm going to pull through, let me go. Generally, that's what it says. And my opinion, though, is it's not so much because the power of attorney itself has the medical component. The power of attorney itself, you don't need a living will because you have the power of attorney with the medical pieces in it, that they can make the medical decisions. What I think it really is for those people that have survived, because these gentlemen here and his wife, they've died on 81. They're fine. They're dead. But if they're living and they're in the hospital, somebody has to make a call. Is it time to let mom and dad go? Is it time to let Aunt Char go? Is it time to let these things happen? And emotionally, I do not ever want to have to be in the situation that has to decide it's time to let my father pass. I actually like him, I mean, there's a lot of emotion with that. But if I have a piece of paper saying, as kind of corny as it sounds, if I had that piece of paper saying, son, boy, let me go, then all of a sudden it's not me making the decision. It really is you making the decision, like, honestly, because you have to decide, are you there? But I had that piece of paper saying, I'm doing what Dad wanted. So in my opinion, the living will is not so much to give that direction, it's to remove guilt from the survivors. It's to remove the pain and the anguish of deciding, I need to let this happen. So it's kind of a crutch. And it's depending on how we write it, some of our children, like let's say my sister, she has a big heart. She's greedy, but we'll talk about that later, okay? But she has a big heart. She's never going to let my mom pass. I just know that. She's not going to be able to let go. She is the wrong person to name on that document. She can be the healthcare. She can take her to the doctor. She can do all that stuff. But she is not the person to make the decision to let my mother pass away. She will never be able to do it. My brother has no heart, okay? He's a lawyer. He does personal injury. He has his own ambulances, okay? I mean, injuries happen, he makes money, okay? He goes and hangs out at the nursing homes and the hospitals looking for work, okay? So he has no heart, okay? So he's the guy to make the decision, okay? He's the one to do it because he is going to look at this very objectively and say, look, here's the stats. Okay, it's time to go. I mean, he might shed a tear on the way to the bank. No, I mean... Oh, man. Okay. Can we edit that out? Okay, but you need to be thinking about who are your players. And I use that as an illustration to say who is the right person. My sister's the right person to make medical decisions, but not the right person to make the end-of-life decisions. So can you have different people? Yes. Can it be the same person? Absolutely. You want the right people. So this paperwork is only as good as the people you name to fill the right positions in the documents. Okay? Have we beat this up enough? Do we want to talk about something more exciting like death? Okay, go ahead. Okay. So the question is can the mental health power of attorney be a part of the health care or the durable power of attorney? There are, in my office, it's not. There are some attorneys that have different opinions about what the law means and what counts and what doesn't count. In my office, I have it as a standalone document because it has enough pieces to it that I want to control the entire part of it, and I think the other document's too cumbersome to try to fit this piece into that document. But there are many attorneys that just try to slip in mental health in the list. And whether it works or not, it must work, I guess. I don't know, I've never had to deal with it. But I guess, like I told you before, I'm persnickety about these documents. And that's just because of the world I live in. So 9 times out of 10, for a young fellow like you, it probably won't be a problem. But 20 years down the road when it may be an issue, I don't want to have an issue when I'm dealing with that. I want it perfect, and so I do it as standalone. So that's probably an attorney preference more than a right or wrong. So, okay, yes, sir. Uh-huh. So the question is there any situation that can negate or override a living will? Oh, yeah. Yeah, and a lot of it is the subjectiveness of it. Is, if you name the person, they think there's hope. Well, we're not even talking about what's supposed to happen. We're still in this person's making decisions about what to do or not do. A lot of times in the living will, this happens frequently. It's like in the living will it says, do not resuscitate. Well, if I'm in a car accident, I have a living will. Yeah, resuscitate me. But the thing is that a lot of people get caught up is that I'm not at that stage. I'm not at an end stage of life. I'm not permanently unconscious. There is hope of my recovery. So we don't even get to the part about do not resuscitate on my paperwork. Realistically, what will happen is if you walk into the doctor, the hospital, and you start waving around your living will, and saying, hey, Dad didn't want this, and you had a sibling there or another child there saying, save Dad, the doctor's just going to put their hands up, say, duke it out, figure it out, we'll get back to you. Because that's what's likely going to happen, regardless of what the piece of paper says. The reason, from a legal perspective, you have the piece of paper, because if you have to end up in court, which hopefully this never happens, but then the judge looks at the paperwork and says, this is what's going to happen. That's kind of the Terry Schiavo scenarios. There wasn't the paperwork in place, and who's supposed to make the decision. Parents weren't willing to let her pass. Her husband and his girlfriend apparently wanted her to pass. And so there's a little bit of a conflict between who made the decision. A living will would have resolved that. So the other part of, I just lost it. So it was probably something brilliant. I just can't remember what I was going to say. So is that responsive? I think I'm maybe nibbling around it. Okay. It's touchy-feely. I mean, can it get overridden? Other times it gets overridden is if your document, some people say, keep me alive no matter what. Now that would be the minority of the paperwork I've done. Keep me alive no matter what. The hospital will try to override that because who's going to pay the bill? Now if you have multi-million dollars, I guess money talks. You know, if you're willing to pay, $100,000 a month for the ICU, I guess, go ahead. Medicare is not going to pay. So unfortunately, a lot of times insurance companies are controlling your care. That's probably beyond the scope of this conversation, but yeah. So living wills, it's trying to help give direction, but it's only as good as what you got. So, okay. Any other questions so far? You ready to talk about another exciting topic? Okay, let's talk about death. Okay? So we already established here in Pennsylvania that death is easy. All right? You're going to be singing with the choirs. We really got to be talking about what happens with those that are remaining. So here in Pennsylvania, if someone were to pass away, we talk about the probate process. Now, the probate process here in Pennsylvania is what's known as a simplified probate process, where the courts do not lock up the assets for any extended period of time. There are some jurisdictions, like if you listen to like the national financial radios or the Susie Ormans of the world, they talk about trust. We want to avoid probate. Probate here in Franklin County, to get us started, is $45.25. That's what it costs to probate the paperwork. Now, the probate process here in Pennsylvania is simplified, where the court doesn't lock up money. In some jurisdictions, and I don't practice law in other jurisdictions, but this is what I hear, rumors, is like in California or Florida or New York or even West Virginia, the court will hold the money for some period of time, 6 months, a year, or longer, before they allow the money to go off to the family. We don't have that situation here in Pennsylvania. We can move money very, very quickly through the estate process and get it to family members as long as the bills are paid and that sort of thing. We do have an inheritance tax here in Pennsylvania. Between spouses, the tax rate is 0. We have a tax, but the rate is 0. Okay? It used to be 6%, but now it's 0. Between children and parents, or children, grandchildren, great-grandparent, children, parents, grandparents, like the lineal ups and downs, that is a 4.5% inheritance tax on the first net dollar. So if you have $100 left after all your debts, you pay $4.50. That goes to the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And that pays for roads and some other things. So I thank you for paying your taxes, okay? And thanks for dying here in Pennsylvania. We appreciate it, okay? So if you're going to die, you might want to consider Maryland, because they don't have an inheritance tax down there. They only start getting you after $1 million. So if you have more than $1 million, you may need to shop around, okay? here in Pennsylvania is a great place to retire because we don't have an income tax on retirement money. So this is a great place to retire, but if you're going to die, maybe move south, okay? Like, once again, if we can plan when you're going to die, we can got lots of options for you. If your beneficiaries are a sibling, it's 12%, and everybody else is 15%. So if you want to give money to the dog, 15%. I've done that before. It's a little bit complicated, but you can do it. If you want to give it to the church or any other charity, it's 0%. So that's a great place to give money. But, amen. See, can I hear an amen? All right. But I've always wanted to say that. It just felt the right place, you know? And I'll tell you, these lamp things, there must be a catalog, because they were exactly, this is what I had in my church growing up. So it must have been in a catalog of Churches R Us or something. You can ship them anywhere. But so a charity is a 0% beneficiary. So sometimes here we're playing with tax issues about, well, I want to give the charity money from my retirement account because there's income tax issues as well as inheritance tax issues. Well, I don't want to give income tax and inheritance tax to my son. Let's give that money to the church or to the Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts or library or whomever, and I'll give this other money that is tax-free to the kids, or I might, we can start looking at, this is where that conversation with your financial advisor, with the attorney, having that conversation about where and what piece is going what direction, it helps us to know what are the ramifications of our choices. Most people, it's, everything goes to the kids. Well, okay, it doesn't matter. It just goes to the kids. But if you're going to include charities or other people, sometimes it makes sense just to kind of talk through some ideas, because there might be ways to save a little bit of money. Now, if you don't mind paying taxes, I don't care. I mean, I already told you I appreciate you paying. But just there are ways to get around some of those bills. Okay? The process here in Pennsylvania says to us you should be able to file an inheritance tax return, meaning you should be able to wrap these estates up within 9 months. That's generally my goal, is to wrap up an estate between 6 to 9 months. Creditors have 1 year to come and try to get money from you, but if we know all the creditors, then I don't have a problem pushing money out, because we don't want the estate to hold things captive. The estate doesn't make any money. I mean, the state, what does it do with it? It just sits in a checking account. So we try to get money out to kids as quick as possible. Other than that, I mean, that's the dying process. Now, this is where you have to kind of reach out to individual assets and accounts, and that's kind of where the executor's job, that's the person that you've named to be the person in charge, their job is to reach out and basically do 3 things. Gather the assets, pay off the bills, and do what the will says. Okay? It's pretty simple. It gets a little complicated if we have kids that are fighting, or it gets a little complicated when you have lots of assets, we don't know where they're at, and we have to just start looking around for things. But that's basically what we're trying to do. We're trying to get whatever you might have had at your passing to who you want to have receive it. And whatever it takes to get from here to there, that's the job of the executor. Now, whether or not they hire an attorney, that's kind of up to the executor. They can decide whether they want representation or not. That's what Faye was talking about earlier. She engaged us to help her in that process. And then that's something that's strictly the executor's decision to whether to do it or not. And that's about it there. Any questions so far? Because I was going to move on to some other things, but go ahead. No, but the question is there a maximum time an estate can go? You hear horror stories of like 10 years or 15 years. A lot of it will depend on the assets themselves and the terms of the will. If the will says, do not distribute money to these people until they're 40 years old, and the baby's 2, well, that's going to be a long process to get it from that person's life to who it's supposed to go to. A lot of times what slows things down is trying to sell like real estate, land, farms is a big deal. what happens if you have one son farming the land, but the will says split it up equally between 3 kids. One kid's in California, just says, send me a check. We have another daughter in Tennessee saying, send me a check. We have a farming son that's here in town saying, I can't send you a check, and this is my livelihood. That's poor planning. There may not be a good answer, but what if you named the executor the one in town who doesn't want to sell the farm but can't afford to pay off his siblings? Well, that's poor planning. What's the option? Well, it would have been nice to have life insurance or something else to fix it, but if you can't fix it, the beneficiaries, the 2 that are waiting, they have to go after the executor and say, you have to finish this up. The beneficiaries have the right to force the conclusion of the estate. The executor is working for the beneficiaries. So, okay. So, yeah, I mean, maximum, I mean, I've had estates for 6 years, but it's because the family just disappeared. They weren't ready emotionally to deal with it, with their father's passing. So they disappeared for 6 years, and the court starts sending letters, and the tax people start sending letters like, hey, where's our money, and what's going on, and I can't force someone to finish. And so eventually people will pop up and wrap it up. But so yeah, no, the answer is there's no, you have to be done by this time. Now don't tell, like if you're a client, I apologize if I told you something different, because I tell my people we want this done within 9 months. I like to try to light a fire underneath them because I don't want this to, linger. I think there's something therapeutic in the process of going through an estate administration. Some of that is a release of someone's life. But some people aren't emotionally ready, so we have to kind of be sensitive to that. But, yeah. So that was a long answer to no. So, okay. Any other questions so far before we're going to talk about nursing homes now, so if you're under the age of 40, you can or you can stick with us. That'd be great. You can leave now. Okay. So what I thought I might do is, it's 6, no, that clock's not right. What time is it? 10 after 7. Oh, no, that is a 7. Okay, yeah, sorry I couldn't read your clock. It's analog, So what I thought I would do is, we've been going about an hour and a little bit. This is a little bit in depth, and so I guess I'm happy to talk to you about this, and I'll talk to you as long as you want me to, but if you get bored, I already told this gentleman here to throw something at me. Okay, but what I thought I would do is I'd work through a scenario, and I'd work through something very quickly. As you can see, I'm kind of chatty, so if you have to leave, I'm sorry. I mean, you can just leave, I'm okay. But what I thought I would do is work through a scenario of a husband and wife situation where one of the spouses goes to a nursing home. What are the rules? What happens to the money? What happens to the spouse? What happens to the income? What is the nursing home going to tell you? And what are your rights and what is protected? Is that maybe more than you wanted, but you ready? Okay, all right, this is where I had to use the whiteboard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a scenario, and I'm just making this up. So if you want to add something in because you think it'd be really exciting, let's do it, okay? But I'm just going to make up a person. I'm going to call them, they're going to be my parents. It's Chuck and Sherry, okay? Now, I don't draw very well, and my penmanship is horrendous. So just work with me, okay? So what we're doing is we're looking at my parents and saying, what do my parents have? And what happens if my mom or my father goes to the nursing home? Now we're going to pick on my dad because my mother is a saint and an angel here on earth, mostly because of my father, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to look at them and they say, all right, well, they have a house, they have 2 cars, they have a little bit of money, and let's say that they have $200,000. Okay, does that look pretty familiar? Now, of this $200,000, this is what's in their bank account, and this is what they might have an annuity that's sitting there. They might have some life insurance with some cash value. They might have some stocks like an E-Trade account or a Edward Jones or Merrill Lynch account. Well, not Merrill Lynch because that's not enough money. But, sorry. Yeah, they're kind of picky. I love Merrill Lynch. But anyways, so this is just all of the assets. I'm not breaking it down into individual ones because that's obnoxious. But my dad, he has a retirement money. My mother was a homemaker. She took care of us kids. She did a fairly good job on 3 of us. We're still waiting to find out about the 4th. But my dad worked primarily, and he has a retirement account, and he has about $100,000 in an IRA. Okay? Look pretty okay. We're not going to, let's leave vacation homes out. My parents don't have that. But, we're not dealing with farms. And those are things that are particular. If you have like a business, things like that, they have some special rules for that. But this is probably, this is a pretty normal client of mine. Actually, my normal client is only about $200,000 or less. In our area, that's a pretty normal, couple who's worked. She may have worked at Stanley Company. He was working for probably not Mac, but maybe Landis or something like that. Okay, and so this is pretty normal. The house, let's say the house is worth $150,000. Let's just put a couple numbers on here. Okay, this car here is worth $10,000. This car here is worth $2,000, and then there's some money. Anybody want to add anything? We good? This book's pretty normal? Okay, my father has Social Security. My mother also, she doesn't have this yet, so I'm lying here. But let's say she has $1,000 a month, and my father gets, let's just say $2,000 a month. Okay, that's some nice round numbers. I can do math in my head. So far, so good. This looks maybe pretty common for a lot of married individuals in their 80s, Now, my father has a massive stroke. He ends up in the nursing home. Here's what you have to understand about that, is if you have a medical issue and you end up in a hospital, generally you have Medicare. You might have a Medicare Advantage plan. You might have mail handlers. You might have Federal Blue Cross Blue Shield. Those are supplemental insurance. Those are some variation of this traditional plan. I'm going to go with the traditional Medicare plan. Medicare, if you're admitted to the hospital for 3 consecutive days, Medicare will pay your rehab for 20 days, 100% covered. On day 21, Medicare picks up a portion, and then you have a copay, and I think it's $146.50, maybe $148, I can't remember right now. $146 as a copay. Well, your Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield picks that up. Okay, yes, sir. Observation. We're going to talk about observation. Okay, so this is why I'm starting out. If you heard me speak very carefully, I said if you were admitted into the hospital. So if you're in the hospital and you look up at the chart there, observation. Or they might have a little sticker or something. That's what I hear that there is floating around. That means you're not admitted in the hospital. You might be in a gown. You might be eating the same food as everybody else, but you're not admitted. If you're not admitted, that means Medicare will not pay for your rehab. So when you're in the hospital, you have to find out, are you admitted or not? And then go fight with her or somebody. I just work here. Leave me alone. No, but you have to find out, am I admitted or not? Under the law, they're allowed to keep you under observation for only 48 hours. That is what the law says. However, I know this might surprise you, not everybody follows the law. I've had people that have been under observation for 2 weeks. It looks an awful lot like they're admitted. Why would you think you're not admitted to the hospital? Because you're getting everything else everybody else gets in the hospital. But technically, you're not admitted. Now, in that case, the simple answer is they shouldn't be able to do that, but they do it. And so there's big lawsuits going around the country right now trying to get this to be stopped, but that's above my pay grade. I tell them, go fight with the social worker, go talk to the doctor, go talk to the administrator, go start screaming at people, call up these advocacy groups, start screaming. But you want to try to get admitted because it's real dollars when you start talking about nursing homes, okay? And so you want to be admitted for 3 consecutive days. That's 3 midnights. So if you go in at 11:58 p.m., so, okay, if you're in the ER and they're saying, hey, we're going to send them upstairs, make sure they date that and timestamp it 2 minutes before midnight. Don't let them round it up to midnight, because you need to have 3 midnights in order to count for the 3 days.
And they'll do that, right? They'll round up.
So you just want to make sure that it's accurate. I'm not saying that. You just want to make sure it's accurate. But for the hospital doesn't care. The hospital gets the same amount of money either way. So it doesn't matter to the hospital whether so they wouldn't round up just because they're trying to stick it to you. They would round up because it's easier to write 12 midnight and not 11:59. But 11:59 and 12 midnight, that's a different answer from a Medicare point of view. And so you just want to make sure you get the 3 midnights, because then you get their 20 days 100% from Medicare. Then your supplement picks up from day 21 up through day 100. However, you're not entitled to all 100 days. What will happen is, and it depends on your insurance companies, and it depends on whether you have an Advantage plan or not. The Advantage plans are totally different. You have to look at them individually. But generally speaking, right around day 40 in a rehab setting, they're doing evaluation. They're doing evaluations all along, but around day 40, I don't know what must be, like some insurance company says, hey, we hit a month. What's going on here? We don't want to pay anymore. And they want to see whether or not you are improving in your therapies. That's the word they use. They need to be improving. This is where they're breaking the law again. My goodness, these people. Okay, it just frustrates me, but this is okay. We're going to deal with it. I'm going through therapy, and it's helping. But with the improvement standard, you don't have to be improving to get Medicare to pay. You have to require the therapy to maintain where you're at right now. So a lot of times the therapist will say, your mother is not improving. We're going to have to stop therapy. Well, I don't care if she's improving. Is the therapy helping her to stay where she's at? Then keep that therapy going. And they'll say, no, we can't do it because of Medicare. No, you don't actually understand what the Medicare rules are. You're supposed to just keep going. And you have to fight with them. Okay, TRICARE for Life, yep, TRICARE for Life is a supplemental insurance that picks up after Medicare picks up. So Medicare is your primary, TRICARE becomes your supplement, okay? TRICARE is excellent, but you still have your 100 days. Because once Medicare stops paying, TRICARE stops paying, all of the other benefits stop paying. Now, veterans, they have a slightly different system if you work into the VA hospital system. And there, depending on what your disability rating is from your service from the military, you may have some rights to money or to long-term care coverage itself. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm glad. Okay. Well, thanks for your service. I will just leave it at that. But the idea is that VA, there's a different system there, and they're kind of screwy. You would know that if you were in the military. But that's a supplemental insurance. Once Medicare stops paying, the supplement stops paying. And then you're looking at a nursing home bill somewhere in the neighborhood of $350 to $400 a day on average. Okay? Now there's some a little bit less expensive in the area, but a lot of them are right in that range. Now we have to recognize that there's a big spectrum of care. On one hand we have I guess over here we have a hospital, but off of that we have a nursing home. Then we have something called assisted living, but then we have something called personal care, and those are not the same things. Okay, so you might say, hey, I got to go to assisted living. Well, that means you're going to Parker House because that's the only one we got. Everything else is personal care. Then we have cottages, independent living. There's maybe in-home care, community-based services. Those are all trying to be more independent or in the community versus a institutionalization. That's the nursing home. So my scenario here, we're talking about my father. He had a massive stroke. He was in the hospital. He was there for 3 days. Medicare decided, under the goodness of their hearts, they're going to pay for his care for therapy. He gets through his 100 days. He is now private pay. because he's used all of his therapy. Now he's private pay. We're going to say $400 a day. So now we wonder, like, oh my gosh, my mom calls me. She didn't tell me before. She just said, hey, we're going to take care of it. Dad's coming home. We're not going to ever be in this nursing home, so we're going to hide from this. Well, if she calls me on day 101, guess what I tell her? I wish you'd called me yesterday. No, I say, why didn't you let me know? What we do is we just start moving forward. If they're in the hospital, we just start moving forward. We may not actually pull the trigger, and we'll talk about that, until Medicare stops paying. We may decide to not do anything. We'll figure it out. But what the rules are is this. Now, we're moving beyond Medicare in these rules. We're talking about medical assistance or Medicaid. First off, we have to just understand, if you go into a nursing home, you cannot tell who's on Medicaid and who's private pay. Everybody there gets the same exact care. So this is not, what I'm not trying to suggest to you, we're trying to rush and get everybody on to public benefits. I want everybody to be on welfare. It's not what we're trying to talk about here. We're talking about my mother. And we're talking about their livelihood, their earnings, their whole entire life savings. My mother is 7 years younger than my father. So if my father is 70, my mother is 63. Yeah. Okay, just carry the one. Okay. My mom has a lot of years to live. So I don't want to impoverish my mother because of my father's institutionalization. At $12,000 a month, that $300,000 will go in about 2 years, 2.5 years, 2 years, something like that. Okay? And so that's what we're looking at. We're talking about these are people, these are their resources. I'm not trying to get inheritances to the kids. I'm trying to take care of the spousal unit here. And so let's talk about what we do. Are you guys so far, are you with me? Anybody slipping? We need to bring you into the fold? Okay. Then let's say what happens. The first day you enter into a nursing home, the state of Pennsylvania wants you to take a snapshot of your assets. And if you're a married couple, they say take a snapshot of your assets. It's called a resource assessment. And that resource assessment is basically just a snapshot of your assets to say what is there. That's what we've just done. We've done a snapshot of the assets. Okay? And so the state of Pennsylvania says, all right, these are the assets. And from there, they set up a formula. They say, well, if there's a married couple, we don't want to impoverish the healthy spouse. So we're going to set up a formula to determine what is protected and what is available. Okay? So here's what we do. Now, I don't know if Pennsylvania does this. They should, because this is easy. We get to draw pictures. Okay? What I do is I just draw this chart. I say, okay, there's money here. Whatever's in this column is protected. Whatever is in this column is available to the nursing home. That's the available column, and that's the protected column. You can see that? Okay, so what is protected? The first thing that is protected is the house. Okay, that's exempt. You can't force someone to sell the house. It's protected and exempt while they're alive. We'll come back to that. Okay? One vehicle is also protected. Well, we're going to choose the more valuable of the two, right? You know, we're going to choose the $10,000 one, make that one protected, because the old clunker, we'll sell it for scrap, whatever. I mean, it's there, but it's not protected. We have to count it. And then the state says what's left. And we come up with $300,000, right? That's what I did with my math, $300,000. The state says one half of that money gets to be used for the healthy spouse. But there's a cap. And just for simplicity, it's going to say $126,000. That's all in your paperwork there if you really want to know the numbers. But let's say it's $126,000. So $126,000, oh, this is not going to make it. No, we're going to be optimistic, okay? $126,000, that's protected for my mother. My father, he's allowed to have a whopping $8,000. That's what he's allowed to have in his name. So that leaves us with what, $134,000? Did I do the math right? Okay, so $134,000. That is what is protected for my parents if my father goes into the nursing home. So what are our options? All right, we're going to talk about options. We say option one. What is my option one? My option one is do nothing. I don't recommend this option. It is an option. Do nothing. Basically, you get a bill and you pay the bill. We have to spend the difference between the $300,000 and the $134,000. So what's that? 156,000? Is that right? Did I do the math right? 166? Yeah, 166. Yeah, 166,000. Okay? So math's really a strong point for me. I got my fingers and toes out. Okay, so 166,000, that's what we have to spend. So in about a little over a year, we'll spend that amount of money. At that point, we can go to the state of Pennsylvania and say, hey, here we are. The first day my father went to the nursing home, here's my assets. This is what we did with them. Here we are. My mom now has $126,000, a house, a car, and my dad has $8,000. They're eligible for benefits. Pennsylvania will step in and say, we'll pay the nursing home going forward. Yes, sir. Okay, so the question is, what about his Social Security? If you are receiving benefits from the state of Pennsylvania in a nursing home, your income is to be used for your care at the nursing home, with a couple of exceptions. They're going to look at the situation and say, wait a second, his $2,000 a month goes to the nursing home. My mom's only getting $1,000 a month. That's kind of tough to live on $1,000 a month. So what the state says is that my mother, out of the goodness of their hearts, says that she gets to have at least a minimum of, and it's $2,250, like $2,250. Actually, I think that just went up by a couple bucks, but $2,300, whatever the number is. And so the state says, oh, well, shoot, she needs to have a little bit of money, so she can keep $1,300 of my dad's income. So once my dad goes on to Medicaid, this is medical assistance Medicaid, he will owe the nursing home $700 a month. Except he can pay for his health insurance. Oh, and he gets an allowance. It's $45 a month. So he gets to keep $45 a month. That's for him to buy candy bars at the snack shack. Okay, maybe snow cone Fridays or something. Okay, and so $45 a month. That's his mad money. Okay, they'll cut his hair once a month. They'll bathe him, dress him, feed him, care for him in the nursing home. He's paying about $700 a month, roughly. That's a pretty good deal. $12,000 down to $700. Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty good deal. But now, where's my mom? My mom's sitting here with $126,000. Yeah, sure, she's getting $2,200 a month. She can live large, I guess. But that's it. There's no more money. It doesn't come back. It's gone. So now we start talking about what are other options. So now I look at option number 2. I say, well, option number 2 is, just to keep it simple, let's just say we're going to spend the money. You're in a race. You're in a race between spending the money somewhere else or spending the money at the nursing home. You might have heard I said one car is exempt. I'm going to look at my mom and say, hey, Mom, you got a car worth $10,000, you got a car worth $2,000. Why don't you trade in both those cars and get a new one? Why don't you go buy something that, has a little bit of oomph to it? I had an old lady. She was wonderful. Like 86 years old, about this tall. She had $86,000 that could have gone to the nursing home. Guess what she did? She bought a car, and it was nice. It cost about $80,000. And she took me for a ride, and I was never more scared than that time in my life. Like she's sitting on like a pillow, so see over the thing. I mean, it was awesome. But that's what she said. Like, look, I'm going to give it to the nursing home, or I'm going to buy this vehicle. And she bought a really nice car. Now, I say it in jest, but that's what she wanted to do. I want a new car. Okay, fine. $80,000 car, that's a pretty nice car. You're thinking about that. Okay, but then what she did, though, is that car she bought was completely handicapped accessible, fully automated. So she could pull up to the nursing home, hits a button, ramp. Husband wheels himself right in, clamps down in the front seat, and they would take their Sunday drives. And that's what she did with her money. Well, one car's exempt. That's what she did. It was a very nice car. It was a nice van. Okay, you were thinking it was a sports car. I know you. But it was a handicap accessible van that was totally tricked out, and it wasn't quite $80,000. I'm exaggerating. She had to spend, she paid for a funeral. I guess we could do that. We could buy a new car. We could pay for a funeral, a prepaid burial. You can fix up the house. You can buy hearing aids, buy some dentures, buy whatever you want. I mean, you can spend the money wherever you want. She could take a cruise. My mom would probably do that. She'd say, hey, see, I'll be back in a month. You know, she'll take a cruise, let my dad stay in the nursing home. She's going to have a good time burning money. You go down to Atlantic City, put it all on black, and let it ride. Just get a receipt. You can spend your money. And because once you had that snapshot, that $166,000, you just need to use it. The problem is you can't use it really in any way that's marketable. I mean, you can't like go buy a piece of land because now you have land that could be sold to take care of it. You could buy a rental property. Because one of the rules is that you can produce income for the healthy spouse and exempt the asset that's being used to produce the income. So this is what we do for like family farms or family businesses, rental properties. Well, those are all exempt. But I need to use that power of attorney. Remember that power of attorney we talked about before? It's important. That's that piece of paper. And it says, I trust my wife that she's going to move these assets out of my name, put it into her name, because one of the rules says that my wife's income is hers, and her income can't and doesn't have to be used for the nursing home. So what if we just make sure my wife has more income? Well, we can produce or we can purchase income-producing assets to do that. Okay, so that's an option. Now we say, well, you know, my mom, she's really frugal. She's tight, actually. My dad, he blows money. But my mom, she's tight. And so we say, hey, look, she doesn't want to just go spend money. Because she's thinking, I'm 63 years old. I got, oh my goodness, 25 years to go. If I blow my money now, that's it. So here's what she can do also. This gets a little, and this, we're kind of doing like Reader's Digest version for those of you who read the book. So we have here, we say, okay, what are my other options? If you heard what I said before, my mother's income is exempt, which means all of her income is exempt. What if I gave her more income? It's exempt, right? What if I took this $166,000 and I converted it to income to her a little bit each month? Now, how to do that, you can do that with annuity, promissory notes. There's different ways to do that. But let's say those are details. But the idea is if you convert it to income in the right fashion, then the state says, oh, that's her income. She just gets to keep it. And none of it goes to the nursing home. That's a zero. So if my mother called me, quickly I'll obey. There's a song about that. But if my mother called me and said, Dad's in the nursing home, what do we do? I say, oh, first thing I would do, convert your assets into income, off we go. She gets to keep all the income. In 10 years, 5 years, whatever, she gets all the $166,000 back. They no longer look at her assets after he's on Medicaid. So she can get all that money back, put it right back in the savings account, and keep going living her life. And the state of Pennsylvania pays for my father. Now, is that right or wrong? Well, this is what the rules are. You know, and whether right or wrong, we can talk about that another time, I guess. But that is what you're allowed to do. That's what Pennsylvania says. We don't want to impoverish the healthy spouse. We want to have mechanisms in place that we can protect our resources. The problem is that the rules aren't published anywhere that make sense. And you have to go through this nonsense you have to jump through the right hoops to get the benefit. No. Here's what the nursing home does. And anybody work at a nursing home? Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, we're good? Okay, you're probably not in the business office then. Okay. So some nursing homes don't like me. I don't know if yours does. They don't? Oh, that hurts. I'm a nice person, I promise. But what it is that I look at this and say, well, in this situation, I want to make sure the nursing home is getting paid. Well, they're going to get paid, but I don't think I need to pay them all of my money in this situation because my mom needs it. And so the formula is set up to say, hey, look, this is what you're allowed to do. A lot of times what happens to my clients is they walk into the nursing home. Well, maybe they're not my clients until after this, but they walk in the nursing home says, all right, we're going to apply for Medicaid. We're going to see if the state will pay. Well, they apply with these numbers here, knowing good and well that you are not eligible. And then what happens, the state of Pennsylvania sends a letter to say, by the way, you have $166,000 too much. That process of applying for benefits takes sometimes between 3 and 5 months. So here's the nursing home's answer. Oh, you got to spend $166,000. Here's my bill for $60,000. That will help. As soon as you pay the other $100,000 to us, you're eligible. Isn't that wonderful? But the problem is that, well, my mom could have went and paid for the funerals. They could have fixed up the house, but they're so, my people get so nervous, I got to pay the nursing home because my husband's there, I got to take care of him, which amen, we got to take care of him. But it doesn't mean you have to impoverish yourself in the process. Okay? And so in the process, I look at this, because the nursing home, they just send the bill. And if you aren't understanding what your rights are and your rules are, they don't tell you you don't have to spend the $126,000. What happens if my mom spends this money and not that money? Well, that money's in my dad's name. That means my mom hasn't actually spent any of the money because my dad has to have only $8,000. And that's $100,000, means she has to cash that in. And she'll never be eligible until that's cashed in. And so we look at the assets and we say, which ones do we attack first? Which ones do we use first? Now, in this scenario, it's awful because we're going to have to cash in that IRA, and we're going to lose about $20,000 or more to the IRS. That's a month and a half in a nursing home. I could care less. I told you I like paying taxes. I mean, it sounds awful, but we're going to lose $20,000 or $30,000 to the IRS because I had to cash in the IRA. Well, that is less than 3 months in a nursing home. Sorry. I get a lot of calls from brokers flipping out because I told their client, we got to cash in the IRA. That's $200,000. I'm like, sorry. I can't. I mean, can you beat $400 a day from this asset? If you can't, we got to cash it in because I can protect all of it for the healthy spouse. Now let's do. I'm almost getting some glazed looks, so I want to keep you guys hopping. But let's say my mother's in the nursing home. Just so you understand that IRA, if it's my father's, is 100% exempt. The numbers completely change if my mom's the one in the nursing home because my father's retirement account is exempt. If you go to Maryland, it's not exempt. If you stay in Pennsylvania, it is. So if you're in a nursing home, you want to be here in Pennsylvania. But we talked about it. You want to die down south, okay? So go to Meritus, let them kill you. But you want to be in Pennsylvania for just drag you and just dump you, I guess. I don't know. But so in my father's situation, if my father's the healthy spouse at home, then I look at here and I say, well, shoot, IRA is over here. This isn't right. There's $100,000 that's protected for. Let's see, one more. $100,000 protected, so we only have $100,000 over here that's available for my mother's nursing home admission. So it just really depends on specifically which assets there are. Okay? Is anybody still with me? Okay. Does this make sense? I hope the pictures help. Any questions so far? Yes, ma'am. Okay. So the question is what about our widows? What about our widowers? What happens if we don't have a spouse? Because everything I'm talking about here, it sounds really good, doesn't it? That's why I was talking about it, because it sounds good. I can protect most everything here. It's really exciting. It's not as pretty if you're a single individual. Okay? Do you want me to work through that scenario? That's all right. I'm going to. I was waiting for you to ask, actually. I knew there was somebody in the crowd. Okay? So let's just change the rules. Or not the rules. We'll leave that alone. Okay? So let's change the situation. We have $300,000, a house, car, and I am alone, and I go to a nursing home. Children or no children? Okay, so then the question becomes this. Can I protect money from a nursing home? Why am I protecting money from a nursing home? Okay, if you say to me, I want to give my money to my nieces because I like them. Okay, then let's talk about it. If you say to me, I want my children to get the money because I want to. Okay, let's talk about it. So the idea here is that you can do whatever you want to do, but what I'm trying to figure out is, let's say your niece comes and talks to me. I'm just making her up, But let's say your niece comes and talks to me and says, hey, Millie is in the nursing home, and how do I get the money? That's happened once or twice. And I'm going to say, well, how's Millie doing? Why are we I'm not here to get you money, but if I go talk to Millie, and Millie says, I want my niece to have the money, that's a very different conversation, isn't it? So the kid that comes to me and says, I want my dad's money, that kind of turns me off a little bit, because I don't think I'm in the business of, gaming the system so you can get an inheritance from your father. But if my client, the father, says, I want my children to get the money, I'm in. Does that make it's the same end result, but it makes a big difference about who is my client. My client is Millie. We're talking about her money. We're talking about her health care. I want to make sure she is good. So let's do this. Go ahead.
I had this friend. He had this kind of job. He had side things that he did that the money he made at his job went right into, it went into, we'll say, an IRA.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, his money at his job, but because his side, because his, he was a fisherman, right? He fished on the side on his time off. And
Sure.
the money he made off the fishing, guiding and all, paid all of his bills and all, and gave him a nice life.
Excellent.
So out of his money, he left his niece and nephew. He made them a thing for when they were, give it when they were 21. So whenever, and the thing is, they knew it, right? And so when he was still living, and when she turned 21, her dad took her over to his house and said she wanted her money.
Yeah. So what I think you're referring to is, yeah.
He didn't like it none, man.
Yeah. So this is where I'm not quite ready to give people money generally until I'm ready to give them money. If you're going to give people money, give them money, but just recognize there's potential issues there. So, but let's say that we have this niece and nephew that we want to get funds to. They're not grabbing, but we're trying to give. Or I want it to go to my children. I want the house to go to my kids. What do I do? So here's what the situation is. If you're in a nursing home, your house is exempt. They can't force you to sell the house. Remember what I said before, while you're alive? If you are a single individual, didn't have that spouse that could transfer the deed to, and then have that spouse say, I love you, but you're getting nothing, then we have a situation. We have a situation where you own a house and it's exempt while you're alive, but if you go on to benefits from the state of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's going to go after the house after your death. And that may or may not be the right answer, and there's ways around it, and that's way beyond what we want to talk about, but there's ways to protect that. But for right now, I'm just going to ignore that. Because in my mind, that house is the same as cash. It's worth $150,000. You have $450,000. It doesn't matter to me if it's a house, car, stuff, money in the bank, investments. It's just assets. It all can become a dollar. Pennsylvania doesn't care if you have to cash in the IRA all at once. They don't care you have to pay $20,000 in taxes. They just say, look, we're not paying until you have a house, one car, and $8,000. So we got rid of that line item there for the spouse, what we can protect for the spouse. And so here we say, all right, well, that means that, we got to scratch off some things here. That means that if we do our math here, let's just keep it simple. Let's just say there's $300,000. Okay? So for $300,000, that is now available to the nursing home. So what are my options? Option one, same thing, do nothing, pay the nursing home. In about 2.5 years, probably less, you'll spend all the money. Okay? At that point, you'd be eligible for benefits. Pennsylvania will start paying the bill. You're going to turn over your income. In this scenario, just to keep it simple, let's say you have $2,000 of income. All right? $10,000 a month from your assets, $2,000 from your Social Security, nursing home is paid. Option two is you can spend the money. You can just start trying to buy things. Maybe you're sitting in a nursing home bed buying things off of Amazon. I don't know, maybe using your phone or the tablet or whatever you use, and you're just spending money. This option doesn't work because there's no spouse to give income to, right? We can't give income to the spouse because there's no spouse. But what if you gave away the money? Let's just give it to the kids, right? Nieces and nephews, just give them $300,000. Wait a second. Well, she has a niece. That she wanted the niece to get the money and not kids, because there are no kids, but that's like a kid for her. I mean, she's the favorite aunt, obviously. So she wants the money to go to somebody. That could be the church. That could be your niece. That could be any charity. It could be your brother. It could be your uncle. It could be anything. Anytime you give away money, the state of Pennsylvania says, are you allowed to do it? Can you give away money? Okay, so the answer is you can absolutely give away your money. But you have to report what you've done for 5 years, 60 months. So if you give away your dollar, you have to tell the state of Pennsylvania. So you may come to me and I'm 78 years old and say, I'm going to give my house to my kids. I said, that's great. Well, let's talk about that. First off, I don't want you to give your house to the kids because I just don't trust them. Because what happens if they die, get divorced, get disabled, and your house gets sold out from under you and you're on the street? So if you're going to give houses to kids, let's keep a little string on there that they can't kick you out. And we'll talk about that. But then the next part of the problem is if you're 78 years old, how's your health? If you're coming in a wheelchair with oxygen, you're on dialysis, and you're like one foot in the grave, the other on banana peel, I might say to you, let's hold off and wait. Let's just see what happens here. Because if we do something, we have this little rain cloud over our heads for 5 years. Now, if you come into me at my office at 78, you just finished your 3rd marathon this year, I might say, I think you might make it. Let's do something. Let's get prepared. The sweet spot for planning, in my opinion, is between about 72 and 78, right in that range, right in that mid-70s. Because you're old enough, you're into retirement, you kind of get it. You know what it's going to be like. But you're young enough that we're going to get through 5 years. Chances are we're going to get through 5 years. Now, at 60-something, you're too young. I mean, you go play, go have a good time, don't worry about it. 80-something, okay, we might still do something, but I get a little bit more nervous. 90, I'm like, let's just wait. Let's not buy our bananas green. Let's just see what happens. Let's just go as we go. And so here, though, we're saying to me, you're in the nursing home today. I don't really care about the 5-year rule because everything I can do today, I could do after you're in a nursing home. So here's what I do. I say, look, you have $300,000. Let's give it to the kids. If I give them all $300,000, the state of Pennsylvania comes back to me and I say, look, I have no money. See, I gave it away. The state comes back and they'll penalize you. They'll say, that's fine. We can't stop you from getting it away, but we're not going to pay the nursing home for 30 months. Basically, for every $10,000 you give away, Pennsylvania won't pay the nursing home for 1 month. Now, that's not per person. It's $10,000, adding things up. And if you gave like $500 to 27 different charities, they just add all those up and they start penalizing. They look back through your bank records for 5 years. And they're really meticulous about looking back through your bank records. They're going to find it. And so what happens is, if we say, well, if I give away all the money and the nursing home's not going to get paid for 30 months, how am I going to pay the nursing home? So I can't give away all of the money. But maybe I want to give away some of the money. Okay? So this is where all right, what's your name? Patty. Excellent. All right, here's Patty over here. Okay? And here is your favorite niece over here. and she's a good girl, okay? And I'm making her up, okay? But this person here, you're saying to me, look, I want my niece to get the money. So what Patty might want to consider doing is let's give the niece half of the money, right? Let's give her $150,000. I keep forgetting my zeros. So if I give your niece $150,000, the state says, wait a second here. $150,000 could have paid for 15 months in a nursing home. For the first 15 months, after you can show us you have no money, then come back in 15 months and we'll help pay the bill. Well, this is a problem because if you gave your niece $150,000, you still have $150,000 over here, right? But Pennsylvania doesn't impose the penalty until that money's all gone. So you have to get rid of that money also. Now, this is where it gets really screwy, if it wasn't screwy before. You have to give this money away to, and let's just say an annuity. This is just, I'm not a big fan of annuities. I don't recommend you run out and buy a bunch of annuities just because it's a great investment option. It does make sense for a very small sliver of the population, but for most people, it's an expensive way to invest money. But the annuity here is a special type of annuity. It says, we will pay back to Patty that $150,000 over the course of 15 months. Isn't that that's really screwy? Like, why would you get a product that pays it back over 15 months? Well, if I do the math, I say, well, if I gave that annuity company $150,000 and they pay it back to Patty over 15 months, that's $10,000 a month, right? You carry the one. Okay, so if I get the $10,000 a month, see, that's the right number, going back to Patty each month, not from a niece, but from the annuity company, then Patty gets her $2,000 from Social Security. That's $12,000. What did we say the nursing homes cost? $12,000. That's right. Oh my goodness, the math worked out. Isn't that wonderful? So that means we pay $12,000 a month to the nursing home so you can keep your job. And she gets her $2,000, gets $10,000, and at the end of the 15-month period, we go back to the state of Pennsylvania and say, here we are. You told me that you were going to penalize me because I gave my niece, who I wanted to give the money to, $150,000. The penalty, the only thing they can do, is not pay the nursing home. Fine. Don't pay. I'll pay. So you go into a partnership in the sense that you spend half your money at the nursing home. The problem is you have to do a bunch of nonsense to get there. And it is just, it is nonsense. I mean, you can't sugarcoat it. It's just nonsense. But you take that $150,000, you convert it to income back to Patty. Patty gets all of her money back from the $150,000. The $150,000 over here goes to the niece. I'm not quite ready for your niece to go down to the Bahamas yet, okay? Because I don't trust her, okay? And that's not, I'm sure she's a wonderful person, but the idea here is that, remember I said I'm not really in the business of getting people inheritances? Now, there might be money left over, but what we might want to do is set it aside that if you need something, we can tap back into that $150,000. Your niece is just holding on to it for you. Or maybe we put it into a trust. What happens if you get better? What happens if you're in the nursing home for a year, but you get better? And you try to go back home. You remember that house you've been maintaining? Well, what money are you going to come home to? $150,000, right there. You wouldn't have spent all your money at the nursing home. Okay, so those are some of the options. That's what I would do for a single individual. But just recognize once you go on to benefits from the state of Pennsylvania, they're going to put it on a ledger, and at your death, they're going to send a bill and say, we want to go after the house. And there's different ways to get the house, and that's probably more than you want. Okay? Any questions so far? I'm about tapped out, but I mean, we've been going strong for 2 hours. And I told him I'm long-winded. I apologize, but this is what I...
He'll appreciate me more on Sunday.
It really will, okay? Except I don't pass the plate. So, any questions so far? Okay. You're leaving. I don't blame you, brother. I don't blame you. Okay? Sure.
So let's say one of us died and the other one's in a nursing home and we have children and we still have our home.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way that the children could get their own assets or not?
So the question is, if I am a single individual, I pass away, but I still have the house intact, is there a way to get it to the children? The answer is yes. It just depends on what hoops you have to jump through, whether you were selling the house or trying to keep the house. If we sell the house, it's just cash, and we just play with cash. But generally speaking, we can protect about half of whatever's there. So if that house is worth $150,000, if I can get the kids to come up with $75,000, I can give them the house. Or we sell the house and we protect $75,000, or we use your money to protect the house. It just depends. So, okay? So if we want to maybe close, and I'll just stick around. If you have maybe questions, we can talk about things specifically or whatnot. So, okay? Pastor Joe, I think I've about worked them over long enough. I softened them up for you.
Just